Hi, Blogging Heads viewers. It's Daniel Strauss of Politico and Woodruff and Strauss, and today we have congressional reporter extraordinaire Matt Fuller back, who deserves incredible patience for on Friday, right after news broke that John Boehner was going to step down. We immediately went to Matt and then kept rescheduling, and then we had computer troubles, Matt, throughout this whole process, but Matt has been a trooper the whole time, and here we are. So, we are here to talk about John Boehner. And the last time you were on this episode, Matt, you bet that this term would be his last term as Speaker. So you should have put money on that.
I also said that day, I had heard that on a staff level, Cantor was, it was known that Cantor was going to become the Speaker, and that he was going to resign, and then the election happened, the primary where Cantor lost happened, and so that's sort of been out in the news now. I mean, I've actually never been able to confirm that with anyone really good. I just heard it sort of through the grapevine, and on Friday, Boehnerland was all saying, he was always going to resign on November 17th, his birthday last year, and then they were saying again, now he's saying, I was going to resign this year on November 17th, but he sort of moved up that timetable a little bit.
So I have so many questions about this because I've been steeped in.
Too.
Yeah, I've been steeped in political campaign world, and there is one thing that I've been wondering about, which is what does this mean for actually Jeb Bush? Which I want to get to later because Jeb, they like each other, right? Close friends. Yeah. Michael Steele, Boehner's chief spokesman and one of the top Republican.
Press secretary. He wasn't ever his communications director, but obviously very senior in Boehner's work.
I think wasn't his title advisor and press secretary before he left or something like that?
Not sure. I know I think honestly he's just press secretary, but he was much more than that. I think he was sort of a staple of that whole office. So
right,
yeah.
Is also now working for Jeb Bush as an advisor. But before that,
Jeb Bush's PAC, right?
Jeb Bush's PAC, right? It's Jeb Bush
that
world.
Weird world where they,
Listen, man, Jeb Bush's team, I think, is always happy to specify that's the PAC, except when fundraising numbers come out. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's Jeb Bush world.
Yeah, we've got 100 million.
100 million, whatever. But that's a conversation for a different day. Can you talk about whatever you want on this, including where you were when this news broke, and how, and important reporting along the way. And then let's talk about the leadership race now, because that's
This is one of those weird things of reporting inside the story a little bit. I got a text message from someone, can't really say who, was, have you heard? Which is if you're a reporter and you get a text that says, have you heard from this particular person? It's I don't know what is happening. But my first reaction was to write back, no, what's up? And then as I'm waiting for that next answer, I'm checking Twitter. I'm going to the people who, because I'm actually thinking this is a Boehner sort of related thing. So you check all your staples and you see that no one's really broken anything. And then he comes back with Boehner's resigning, which is that's earth shattering. So I then spent the next 10, 15 minutes trying to confirm that. I'm texting members who are in the conference meeting because Boehner did this inside of a conference meeting at this 9 a.m. regularly scheduled weekly conference meeting that Republicans have the second day back. So they did have their first day back. They just go to votes or whatever. For this week, it was sort of odd. They had the Pope here. But then Friday was technically really their first full day back in essence. So they had their weekly conference meeting, and that's where Boehner did this. And he really, kept a pretty tight lid on the whole thing. So, yeah, for me, by the time I confirmed it, I confirmed it, and because I actually sent out an email to internally, this is what I'm hearing. I haven't confirmed it, but stand by your computer. And yeah, by the time I think I tweeted something I'm hearing eventually I was wow, I'm going to let this. So I tweeted something I'm hearing some pretty big Boehner rumor. And then a minute later, the New York Times was up with, Boehner resigning. So, yeah, it was pretty crazy. And then
it always stings when the Times beats one of us Beltway publications. We're always
Yeah, I mean, part of it is a lot of the members who, maybe not to reveal too much of whatever how I do this whole thing, but a lot of them who I normally am, really close with, have good open lines of communication with, just weren't at that conference meeting that day. So me actually asking them was how they learned, and I actually ended up telling a lot of members, sort of coming in and. Actually, it was weird because I was, I live very close to the Capitol, so I was walking over when this all sort of happened, and when I'm coming in, I knew it at this point, so I'm telling security guards, have you heard Boehner's resigning? And they're all just, so it's a very weird thing where you're the person, and I don't know why it was just. It's not like I'm celebrating or anything. It's just one of those weird things where a piece of information, you just can't wait to tell people because it's an exciting thing for a reporter because it means so much. I mean, it means these leadership elections. It's sort of a vindication for a lot of these conservatives, what they've been saying, and a lot of the hours I've spent staking out Tortilla Coast and talking to these guys who, and at some point you start believing this is never going to happen, or Boehner's never going to resign. He's going to be here forever, but that wasn't the case.
Well, and I mean, my understanding from the reporting I've read, I mean, it was I don't know, it was where I was sitting down with, as Politico does, two other reporters at the Values Voters Summit on Friday, and my friend Dylan G-chatted me, and he was like, no other news will, or he does in this very, very sort of cryptic Dylan Scott way. He G-chatted me, no other news matters today. He doesn't tell me what it is. And I'm like, oh, Dylan, just say whatever it is you mean. And then I see the New York Times alert, and I was like, oh, and everything changed. And I was in the room. The two other reporters were out of the room when Marco Rubio said, I just heard that John Boehner has decided to resign in
to
a few.
Applause, right?
Yeah, and
I don't think Rubio meant it that way, right?
No, he didn't. I mean, he'll always take an applause, but no, it was like, and then Rubio was like, we should thank him for his service or something like that.
Right.
Some of his opponents were.
Ted Cruz went a decidedly different direction on that one, right?
Right. Oh, I get to Ted Cruz.
He set up a couple of applause lines, right?
Yeah, he did. So, I mean, there's so much about this here because he's the first. He's presided over the new Republican majority, right, in the House, and he's been the highest-ranking Republican official in D.C.
Since 2008.
Yeah,
7 years, more than 7 years now.
I guess
February of 2008.
Yeah, I don't know where to start.
I mean,
here.
it's a different world, right? Like we're coming up, we're sort of waking up into this new thing, and right now conservatives are sort of pushing for a totally new direction. But the great part about this story is that all indications, I think, everyone sort of looking at these leadership races really closely are saying nothing will change. That we're looking at a scenario where literally everyone could move up one rung. It could be Kevin McCarthy becomes speaker, which is actually probably worse for these conservatives. I mean, Boehner, for all the gripes that these conservatives had against him, and they had quite a few, Boehner was at his core a pretty conservative guy. I mean, he likes to tout that at one point he was the 8th most conservative member of the House, whatever, how you want to count that then and now, whatever. But McCarthy, I think, is, his personal politics. I mean, he's California's Bakersfield, and it's not as conservative as a lot of these other guys in the House, certainly. And I don't think he's going to be much of a difference if he is the speaker. And I think almost everyone expects him to be that, save some sort of crazy development that comes out that could happen. But we all sort of expect him to be the speaker. And then from there, you have the majority whipper now, Steve Scalise, who could move up a rung. Obviously, he's coming from
conservatives, right?
Well, I think yes and no. I mean, if you talk to the really conservative guys in the House, one of the terms that I always heard was leadership stooge. This goes back from when McCarthy
leadership stooge.
Yeah, he won the RSC election a few years back now, over Tom Graves, who was really the conservative guy in that RSC election. And everyone sort of said, the RC is not what it was. And actually, this is maybe the starts of the House Freedom Caucus, right?
Mm-hmm.
The House Freedom Caucus really came up and rose as a reaction to the RSC being too large or too members feeling it was too affiliated with leadership. I mean, we're talking a 170 member organization out of 247 Republicans, so it's large. And the House Freedom Caucus, which is this newly minted conservative group I've been kind of obsessed with. It's about 42 members right now.
The Freedom Caucus?
The House Freedom Caucus, yes. And they sort of were the splinter group from the RSC. Now, I think they have really worked well with the RSC, but they definitely are a little bit more out there. They're a little different from the RSC and how they operate.
So, yeah, I mean, one thing that the reporting I'd seen, and again, the caveat here, and Betsy, I think, who we were trying to get to do this, is a little more plugged into the House and Congress right now than I am, is that Boehner, for the longest time, didn't want to step down because he felt there was the infrastructure wasn't set up to retain his legacy after he left, right? And it's funny because that's kind of the question with Democrats too, and President Obama right now. I think there's a fear that, or there's some griping that Obama just didn't leave the infrastructure in place for when he leaves. And like Hillary was supposed to do that, but like it's funny that these two leaders, there's always been that sort of like complaint around or that sort of sense.
Well, Boehner's staying. I mean, so this is the thing is that, Boehner's claim is he would have retired the beginning of this year, so he would have announced his resignation on his birthday, November 17th of 2014, and left, and then Eric Cantor would have, moved into the Speaker's office, and he decided not to do that because of that same sort of concern that he'd be leaving without sort of the infrastructure there or the place there, or it was just too much change. I think he felt certainly, McCarthy coming in June, at the end of June, or really actually August, functionally, and then from there, really September, because they don't start until, after the first week of September. So if that were to happen, we were looking at a situation where an outsider really could break into leadership. And I think that Boehner stayed that extra amount to make sure that it was someone like McCarthy, that it wasn't one of these conservatives who, seemed poised like they could challenge. Everyone likes to bandy about the name Jeb Hensarling, right? That'd certainly be a different change. I actually don't expect him to run, but the good thing about this is, this will air probably when he decides he will run. But I think that every indication I have from Texas Republicans is that he's just not there yet. And I think that Hensarling sizing up the race is looking at this like, I probably don't have a chance. And if you're not in this thing immediately, I mean, the people who we learned last time, the trick here is to jump in the race immediately. You have to be calling members immediately, gathering as many commitments as possible, and sort of the air of inevitability for McCarthy. Like, are you going to say no to the guy who's definitely, almost probably, going to be the speaker? You're going to say, let me wait it out and see who else runs? That's not a great strategy if you're a member of Congress. Obviously, commitments don't really mean anything in this situation because it's a secret ballot.
Right.
But I think generally members sort of stick by their word on these things, and certainly it prevents a lot of other members who might be interested in the position of jumping in. And we've already seen Paul Ryan say, I'm not going. And I mean, if you expected him to run, then you just haven't been paying attention. Every indication has been he's just not going to do it. I think the same thing with Jeb Hensarling. Jim Jordan, the House Freedom Caucus chairman, who certainly would please a lot of conservatives to run. Don't think he could really win, but that would be another guy to watch. He said he's not going to run. And the House Freedom Caucus itself is saying, we're probably not going to put up anyone for speaker. We're going to try to vote as a block, as a coalition of 40 members or so, and try to have some influence in those races. I don't think they have as much influence on the speaker's race, the immediate speaker's race, but majority leader, majority whip, like if it is those everyone moves up scenario, they definitely have some impact. And certainly on the floor for the speaker election, because the interesting thing here is, the dynamic doesn't really change with either a motion to vacate or another speaker election. These guys have enough members where they could theoretically block Republicans from getting their speaker in. So McCarthy will sort of have to, appease them or placate them in some way, or at least we imagine. Or they could just go to the floor and say, let the chips fall as they may, and let's see what Democrats do, which would really be an exciting time too.
So what do we know about McCarthy as Speaker? He's risen pretty quickly, right? Because after Cantor was knocked out by David Bratt, McCarthy succeeded him, and he's a very cheerful guy, right? And a good fundraiser. I think that's. I really don't know that much about him.
No, he's a good fundraiser. I mean, the thing is that anytime you're in leadership, you're usually a pretty good fundraiser.
Right.
So, first of all, you want to talk about like a meteoric rise in politics. 15 years ago, Kevin McCarthy was a community college board administrator, right? So he's like sitting on that's his first foray really into politics, and then he gets into Congress in 2006, right? So then immediately kind of is somewhat of a rising star, I'd say. By 2008, he's certainly sort of in the inner sanctum a little bit with Republicans, and he very quickly becomes the majority whip, then the majority leader in June, and now he's presumptively the speaker. That's a crazy sort of rise from someone. I mean, you're looking at Boehner has a 25-year career in Congress, so he was the conference chairman in the late 90s and lost that, became ed and workforce chairman. Sort of, he was like spurned from leadership, and then he kind of came back in this rise. It's a much more traditional sort of rise than Kevin McCarthy's, which has been just sort of straight to the top.
Right.
But yeah, what do we know about Kevin McCarthy? Guy still lives in his office, like a weird thing. Doesn't drink. Romney
doesn't drink. Mitt Romney doesn't drink.
Well, that's that Mormon thing, right?
I don't think Biden drinks, right?
He doesn't drink either. Yeah, there was always that weird thing about the beer summit, if you remember. He had the non-alcoholic beer. I can't remember which one it was. But,
that stuff is terrible.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But we could go on a long aside about non-alcoholic beers for a while. But I mean, he's certainly dedicated to his job. He's a guy, who lives and breathes this stuff, but he always goes home on the weekends. Like that's another bit of this. And obviously, Boehner's life, he was saying, I think last week, I mean, the speaker's life is not fantastic. I mean, you're spending, 100 days in Washington, and then Boehner's saying he spends like 170, 180 days on the road every year, right?
Yeah.
So just fundraising. So you got to really like asking people for money and going and meeting with members and, just a constant grind. And for Boehner, it's actually amazing that he's sort of tolerated this long, because there's really been not much of a reason for him to stay here. Obviously, all the speculation was maybe he's waiting for a Jeb Bush presidency. Maybe he's waiting for a Republican. Maybe he wants to sort of govern with a Republican in the White House. But I think, privately, everyone sort of said he's done here. He wants to go play golf at Augusta, and I think that's exactly what he's going to do.
Yeah, I mean, and he's pretty good at golf, right? That's the thing.
Oh, he's really good, yeah.
So I guess, and like, Matt, most of these questions I've been asking you. So what is important to know about this? And then I wanted to also ask, let's go to succession next, right? So first off, just now, we're taping on Sunday, and a little bit earlier today, Boehner was on the Sunday shows, Face the Nation, and he was asked about Ted Cruz, and he referred to his comments at a fundraiser.
Yeah, fundraiser.
A few months.
We called him a jackass.
Which is, I think, a good segue into one big question here, which is the outside groups and sort of the rabble-rousers within the Republican Party. Boehner never, controlled a fully united caucus. And part of this was fueled by groups like the Senate Conservatives Fund, which has a House project for the House, and
Heritage Action.
Freedom Works, Club for Growth.
They're on there. Yeah. Sure.
So there's ecstasy about Boehner going, but do they are they?
Yeah, getting the ecstasy of John Boehner's retirement.
Yeah, but that's not going to last, right? They're not going to because Kevin McCarthy, like you said, isn't going to be better.
I tweeted something on Friday, which was I think you could pre-write your story for 6 months from now to publish that says, John Boehner's gone and nothing has changed. The dynamics here, within the Republican Party of conservatives who really want to address debt, who want to tackle Obamacare, who want to defund Planned Parenthood. Those guys aren't going anywhere. Mm-hmm. And then you have the other Republicans, the sort of John Boehner Republicans, who say we have a responsibility to govern. Let's fund the Export-Import Bank. Let's do a highway bill. All those sorts of kind of keeping the trains running on time sort of things. Although I think if a member of Congress heard me say that about the Export-Import Bank, they'd shoot me. Mm-hmm. So I just from a Republican sort of point of view, they're still very split. I mean, this is a party, the Big Ten party here. That's not going to change. And if McCarthy takes the speaker, and if Scalise takes majority leader, which obviously, I mean, these things aren't certain, and certainly Scalise is going to face some opposition. I mean, you've got Catherine McMorris Rodgers, who's technically the number 4 Republican in there. She could, find a lot of traction with a lot of messages. I mean, certainly Scalise is going to have some reservations from members. This sort of this KKK thing that's been hanging out there for.
So right, it was that he went to a fundraiser in Louisiana.
Not a fundraiser. He spoke at a group that has ties to the KKK, David Duke aligned sort of group, and he says, at the time, this is when he was a state legislator. I think it was 2002. Mm-hmm. He says, I was talking to anyone who would listen back then, and generally. Speaking,
not the best response, or not the best,
the best policy, probably.
Listen. Yeah,
but nonetheless, I mean, he's apologized, and I think that this has been litigated a little bit through the media, which people who have really looked at this, and I believe Politico went down and really did a sort of exhaustive deep dive on this whole thing and tried to find. Okay, is Steve Scalise is there some sort of alignment with the KKK? And no one could really find anything. So, maybe he gets through this without that being a real issue.
Right.
We don't know. I can tell you that every indication I have, and not to sort of violate a lot of these off the record discussions I've had this weekend, but I think this is going to get pretty dirty. This race. I mean,
for the House Majority Leader.
Well, leader, for whip, for speaker. I mean, all of it. I mean, first of all, we're talking about a leadership race, and these things. I know to the normal American, it just sort of like, well, who cares, right? It's just like whoever's up top, nothing's going to change, whatever. And there's some truth to that, but there's also this bit that this actually has an impact on almost every decision of the House and in Congress and the United States of America going forward. I mean, these people actually do matter, especially these people in these top positions, because I mean, you can look at Boehner and Republicans, and this is sort of a reflection of voters sending a Republican majority, but he did constrain a lot of spending. Like, look at what Obama was talking about in coming into office in 08 and 09, saying, "Here's my budget. I want to spend this much. We got to infuse all this cash," and that just didn't happen. I mean, you have sequestration and the Budget Control Act. That, those were huge in actually sort of choking spending. And Republicans like to talk about 2 years of the deficit going down. So
right.
I think it's the first time since the Korean War. So these positions do matter. And like small decisions like the Export-Import Bank, that's another one. Certainly leadership sort of reacting.
So it's going to be dirty. It's going to be like, bare knuckles, brawling in a lot of...
We don't know. We don't know yet. I'm just saying people are preparing things that could be dirty.
Goodness.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a humble campaign reporter, so I don't know anything about these fancy technical congressional fights.
Well, I mean, here's the thing is like, I'm sure you've seen Oppo files, right? The opposition research files on these candidates. Mm-hmm. Which are sometimes brutal, sometimes they're just
sometimes they're really. I mean, like sometimes
you just sort of roll your eyes.
Yeah,
like
you're just like
staffers live.
But the funny thing about those, Betsy and I have talked about them before. It's the funny thing about those a lot of the time. It's always the things that pick up are always the things that either the reporter or the person pushing the oppo was like, I don't know if this is going to do all right. My boss wants me to like share this with you, Daniel.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you go and you're like, yeah, I'll write it or something, or like I'll look into it. It's sort of interesting.
Well, it feels like, not to go totally off track here, but it feels like a little bit of that with the Hillary Clinton email stuff, right? I mean, I think a lot of people said the Clinton Foundation is going to be where, you're looking at sort of the scandals here. And then what people sort of really attached themselves to, and I think understandably, was the Hillary Clinton emails and this sort of fiasco, because it's so easy to comprehend and see.
Yeah, exactly.
Sort of mentality, right?
So do you think the attacks to give you a bone here while talking about this, will the attacks, do you predict, be easy to comprehend? Because this is one thing I always say, which is that the most dangerous scandals are the ones that you can put on a bumper sticker. It's like Hillary Clinton deleted emails, Bill Clinton White House intern. It's never going to be something like what Scott Walker wasn't done in by one of the big attacks early on with him, which was that, he was sort of, it seemed like he was having some some illegal or out of bounds coordination with outside groups during re-election, because that's really complicated and that stuff. But like Chris Christie,
let me look at the three-prong test.
Revenge, people get that. Are we going to be able to get some of the attacks that are going to come this way?
So this is the interesting thing about a congressional leadership election is you don't really need to convince voters, right? This isn't a bumper sticker election. This is one where it's members of Congress who are high information voters for the most part, and we're not really sure how much outside pressure and the mobilization of voters actually matters. Certainly it mattered in the speaker election, and what really did Boehner in is years of conservatives calling members and pressuring their members. I mean, that's really why Boehner resigned. I mean, we can talk about the House Freedom Caucus. We can talk about potentially guys like Tom Price, who's running for majority leader, and Roscom, who's probably running for majority leader or speaker or something. We can talk about these guys sort of spinning the wheels a little bit here and talking about maybe moving up in the ladder, and that maybe moved up Boehner's decision. But really what it was, and I truly believe this when he says it, he says, Boehner says, I didn't want to put my members in a position where they had to vote for me again, where they had to protect me when I'm already on my way out, right? And this is the thing, is that having to vote for Boehner for a lot of members was a damaging vote. It was one that a lot of members never really recovered from. And maybe Mark Meadows, who offered this motion to vacate, to get really in the weeds here a little bit, but he said, I think his strongest argument against Boehner was that a speaker vote should be the easiest vote you take in a Congress. It's the first vote after basically calling the roll. It's the first vote they take in a Congress, and it should be an easy one. Like, you just, you vote for your party, you vote for the guy. And for so many members, it wasn't. It was actually the hardest vote they'll take in a Congress. And I think Boehner said, you know what, like, if they're going to actually go forward with this, or they're going to put this through, I think I'm going to have the votes to survive. Yeah, maybe it takes some
Democrats, right? He would need Democratic help,
I mean, he on Face the Nation this morning, he said he thought he'd quote probably have 400 votes, which obviously means I had Democrats. I don't know what the commitments there were. Certainly, a lot of conservatives were saying what's actually going to happen is Democrats are going to vote present. This is all very weird, I know, but basically abstain from the vote, and then you raise the threshold to basically just Republicans voting for us. And then it's, again, 124 Republicans to take down Boehner, which is not going to happen, but you might have 40 or 50 even voting against him, and it just wouldn't matter. Maybe he knows, I mean, obviously he knows something I don't. But conservatives were going to either way argue it's an untenable position for Boehner to be in charge when Democrats are the people who he's relying on to have his job. So how is he going to negotiate with Democrats on the debt limit? And how is he going to negotiate with them on spending caps when Democrats could just go to him and say, we could get rid of you at any time? So yes, that was the thing that conservatives had on their side, was that they could make his life really unpleasant. And also they could make life unpleasant for a lot of members that Boehner actually did care about. So I think, that was what really made the decision for him. To try to get back to your question a little bit, which was how much does this resonate with voters, I guess. Some of it maybe will. A lot of this is whether or not it resonates with a coalition. So you got to think how these elections sort of work, where members are going after certain sects of the conference, right? So you're going after conservatives, or you're going after the House Freedom Caucus, or the Texas delegation, or whatever, or establishment Republicans, whatever. So there are some attacks out there that I think these guys have against. It's a lot of it is just sort of what these guys have stood for in the past, what they've said in the past. They're sort of waiting on these members to trip up a little bit and maybe go after one of those organizations, which would then sort of tarnish your reputation with a conflicting organization, right? So if you're going after conservatives and you sort of try to appeal to them, and then that's going to sort of hurt your chances with the establishment Republicans who are saying, well, I'm not voting for the guys. I mean, this is almost an open war here, right? Yeah. You have Devin Nunes calling these guys right-wing Marxists, and
right-wing Marxists?
Yeah, that was 2 weeks ago.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, Peter King likes to refer to them as the crazies, and Devin Nunes also called Justin Amash, I think, Al-Qaeda's best friend in Congress. I mean, this has gotten pretty brutal, right, at this point. So when you have a member going after one of those sorts of voting blocks, and then you could then go behind them and say, hey, look what he said in the private, or look what he has said here in the press, or whatever, that can be sort of damaging. And that's sort of where these it gets a little bit dirty. It's not necessarily the total mudslinging, although that might exist out there.
Right.
He said ominously, but
okay. So one thing. So does Ted Cruz suddenly change his tune to "I hate John Boehner" to "I hate Kevin McCarthy"? And it seems like the big sort of establishment versus outside conservative fight is for House Majority Leader with Scalise and McMorris-Rodgers, and I think, and we had a report. Our Jake Sherman reported that Pete Roskam from my home state, Illinois, is also in the mix for this.
Yeah, so Roskam is got an interesting gambit going right now. He's just sort of saying, let's slow down the process. We had heard there was some reports that they would be voting on this as early as Thursday, which we're talking about less than a week from Boehner resigning to that. Very sudden. And then this is sort of what happened last time. It was a week from when Cantor lost his primary bid to the election. So conservatives are all like, well, let's slow this down. This is a major decision. This is sort of a crossroads for our party. Let's talk this through. And there's a lot of group people who say, no, let's jam this thing through immediately. Right. People who basically have the votes already. So Roskam, I think wisely said, let's slow down the process. I don't know if I'm going to run yet, which is like, wink, wink,
so he's
whatever.
Just floating it. It's like
he's just floating.
Yeah,
right.
They do this in the campaign world. I don't know if I'm going to run. I'm going to set up a PAC and see what happens.
Yeah. This is sort of like setting up your exploratory committee. So he got 50 signatures, which you need 20% of the conference to schedule a special conference meeting. He's basically showing them that he has this sort of organization. He has the ability to sort of fight the establishment, okay, which Peter Roskam for most of his career was definitely part of. He was the we can argue who's the number 4 Republican, but he was the chief deputy whip when Scalise, when McCarthy was the whip. Okay, so he has an office basically right there. He's in leadership is the point of it.
So Roskam's just kind of trolling them. Is that your bet?
I don't know if he's trolling them. I mean, I think he's making.
Hasn't he? He's always been kind of an ambitious fellow, right?
Definitely ambitious. I mean, he had a great moment for himself this summer, and then coming back in September, where he essentially pushed Republicans down the strategy of, okay, we're going to lose the Iran deal vote. This is going to go through. Let's preserve our legal ability. And Roskam's a former lawyer. Let's preserve our ability to vote to take this to the courts, essentially, try to have a court strike it down because Obama didn't fulfill his obligations under the Iran Nuclear Review Act by sending these, quote, side deals to Congress. So, and this was a strategy that the House Freedom Caucus sort of made a reel by saying, if you don't do this, we're going to vote down the rule for you, because Congress the House at least, was poised to vote on a resolution of disapproval of the Iran deal in an attempt to send it to the president, so he has to veto it, and then the whole thing goes on record. So Roscom sort of was one of the authors, or maybe the main author of this whole strategy, and the Freedom Caucus conservatives aligned with him and said, that's a good idea. Let's do that. So he's had some success here by having his way with Republicans.
He's had some points on the board.
Right. He's had some points on the board. And, he's got some credentials here. I mean, this is the chief deputy whip position. That was what Hastert was, right? Another Illinois Republican who became speaker. He knows how this game is played. I mean, he's a smart guy. He definitely could have some game in this. Where his vote's going to come from, it's unclear. Like, this is the sort of, this is really like if you want to get down to politics and like the political junkies, this is like crack addict politics stuff, because this is so inside the baseball, like you're inside the baseball.
No, I just.
But yeah, so like the votes. So Tom Price is probably going to run for majority leader. I think he and Ross.
Tom Price too.
Yeah, Tom Price is in the mix. We might have a lot of other guys. You could see you could actually see a conservative run for majority leader.
What's the value in being majority leader? Is that like attorney general, so you're in line to be speaker one day, or?
No, the majority leader is actually, I think, pretty important, because the majority leader is technically the one who schedules the floor action, who's the one who's in charge of the floor schedule. Obviously the speaker has sort of a final say on this sort of thing. But definitely the majority leader has real power in Congress, and particularly on a lot of smaller items too. You want to talk about, one of these smaller bills gets through, or even like post office naming stuff. It matters, is the truth. It really does matter. And the majority leader has a major impact with the conference and where they are, and the strategy that Republicans take and go through. You're the number 2 Republican, so there's always that, but definitely important. And the whip too. The same thing. The whip is in charge of getting people on board and going that here's the plan, let's go there. But also the whip is sort of this like communication position between the conference and leadership a little bit, which is why it's been so valuable. I think this is why McCarthy has been so successful, is he was a whip who had a real open door policy. He really went out of his way to kind of keep people in the loop, and that was why he moved up to majority leader pretty quickly. And I think the same thing with speaker here could happen again, because he's had such a decent relationship with members, and Scalise has certainly tried to do the same thing. So even with a lot of the KKK stuff, I still think Scalise is odds-on the favorite here. And then from there, in the whip race, so if it is, McCarthy moves up 1, then Scalise moves up 1. Then you have a race for the whip position, and then you have a guy who's a very capable chief deputy whip now, Patrick McHenry, who's clearly running, and I think Pete Sessions.
Isn't he the guy? Oh wait, I'm thinking of Jeff Sessions. Sorry, isn't Patrick McHenry the guy who wanted to put Reagan on like the $20 bill or something like that?
I don't know. So the weird thing with McHenry is when he came to Congress, he was really this like conservative, firecracker kind of guy, and he came in like 29 years old. He's been in Congress now for, I think, more than a decade, and he's still very effective. I think people who really know their stuff look at McHenry as one of the more capable members of leadership, and he's very privately behind the scenes working stuff. But on the majority leader race too, just real quick, you have Pete Sessions who could also jump in, who's, he looked like he was poised to go for majority leader. The Texas Republicans, who are an important voting bloc, you have 25 Texas Republicans in Congress. So that's the largest delegation for Republicans. They said, maybe you should go for whip. We think you might have a better chance there. And I think he's poised to do that. We'll see this week, maybe even tomorrow, later, whatever. But yeah, he's running in this, and the thing about that is, McHenry is very capable, but Sessions
it's a $50 bill. McHenry proposed a bill to put Reagan on the $50 bill. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, that's a weird sort of red meat thing, right? But it sort of speaks to maybe a little bit to his calculus. Like, that's a free issue, right? That's going to have traction with only a very small group of conservatives or whatever, and most people aren't going to really care about it as long as like it doesn't become an actual thing. It's just like whatever. Right. And obviously, I mean, we've seen in the Republican Party for years how Reagan has been lionized by everyone. The race to be Reagan. But anyway, just Sessions has a real shot here because, and that's going to sound crazy to a lot of people if you know Pete Sessions and
no, it doesn't. I don't know. Pete Sessions. So Pete Sessions, what I know about him, and I did a little. He had a primary challenger in 2014, right?
Katrina
Pearson. Yeah.
Yeah. And who, certainly challenged him on the right and was trying to mobilize voters that direction. I think, the thing about Sessions is he's a 2-time NRCC chairman, so he brought in a lot of these members. He's the guy who was there during that 2010 class that, the quote, fire Pelosi thing. So he has relations with a lot of these guys. Plus, he's from Texas. You have 6 chairmen from Texas, which is incredible. And those guys can carry a lot of weight. Plus, I'm hearing, Fred Upton might be part of it. We don't really know who's
of Michigan?
Of Michigan, who's the Energy and Commerce chairman. So there's a lot of room here for a real challenge from Sessions. We're just sort of finding out where it is. But obviously, these positions only open up the lower tier ones. It requires McCarthy winning speaker. It requires Scalise winning majority leader. The other scenario is Kathy McMorris Rodgers, who's technically number 4, the conference chairwoman. If she were to win majority leader, then there would be an opening in that position. And it seems like some of the lower tier, like secret leadership, like people wouldn't really know about like Luke Master from Indiana and Lynn Jenkins from Kansas. Though they appear like they would want that position themselves. So
okay. So what is? I hate this question, but now we're about 408 days out from the election. What does this mean for 2016? So, not only in the sense that, does Ted Cruz start attacking McCarthy, but, do you know? I don't know who the best relations Republican presidential candidates have with these names who are coming up. I'm going through the list of we're at 15 candidates now. I can't think of any strong connections beyond Boehner and Jeb.
Right.
Sort of trading staff.
We certainly knew that was a strong connection, and I don't think Boehner was going to publicly endorse him if he were speaker. I think he probably will at some point now.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is that
wait. Why does that change? And I don't mean to ask critically. I just why? Because Eric Cantor already endorsed.
Yeah, when you're out of Congress, I think it's a little bit easier to because it's not just John Boehner, it's Speaker John Boehner. Mm-hmm. So, there's maybe an element of maybe impropriety, but certainly it divides a lot of Republicans and would just kind of piss people off, I think, and make it even harder for, Boehner to survive and these establishment Republicans to say, oh, God, why'd you have to do that, John? I got guys who are rabid Trump supporters and you're, going with Jeb Busher now. So this is the first point I want to make on what does this mean for 2016. Boehner leaving has an impact because Boehner staying would have had an impact. I think the plan from conservatives, and this was sort of what I talked to them a lot about, was you put this out there, this motion to vacate, and you let the outside conservatives sort of come into that play. You let the presidential candidates. I mean, I think everyone was sort of thinking, and interestingly. So the Boehner leaves right before the next debate. Right? Mm-hmm. He leaves on the 30th or 31st, whatever. I think the next debate is early November. Is that correct?
I think so.
So
I should really be better about the schedule, but I think we might have. I feel like we have a debate before then.
Well, you certainly if they do, you want I don't think there's a debate in the next 2 weeks. So it's not like we're going to get a question like, who do you want to see as Speaker of the House or whatever. But you certainly, I think, would have gotten a question of, should John Boehner be Speaker? I'm actually surprised that Jake Tapper didn't ask it this time around. Should John Boehner remain Speaker of the House? Because, it's a real inside Beltway question, but for me, it would have been that's just maybe my own personal, dysfunction. But, I just think that Boehner staying would have had a massive impact in 2016. This sort of clears the decks a little bit for that.
Well, why? Why would it have a massive? Because
it was just having it, for a lot of conservatives and for a lot of outside groups and just sort of the Heritage Action Sentinels and that sort of crowd. Boehner came to represent something that, whether he is or isn't, it was just sort of damaging for establishment Republicans because he was just hated among conservatives. I mean, at this point, we're talking about Republicans who just, I don't know how to put this, but there's not a war, but there's certainly a fight here. There's a struggle, and both sides, and there's not to say that it's just two sides. I think there's many sides to this, but in essence, the two sides, they're increasingly hating each other. And I think that Boehner staying sort of put that into sharper focus. So Boehner leaving, that has an impact in that element. Who becomes speaker? Kevin McCarthy. I just don't know if people really know how this works. I will say this, that if it is the scenario where everyone moves up one, right, that is going to play with, I mean, you saw Jindal say this, like, he's when Boehner left his line, which is, kind of crazy actually, which is 435 members in. That's one down, 434 to go for DC, which is such a broad brush sort of way of painting this. And, we see this same reaction of members running for Congress by running against it, and running for the presidency by running against the institution of the presidency, whatever. If it is just everyone moves up one, I think that will have an impact. And I think that it's difficult for Republicans running for president just to say, yeah, that's the way we should have gone, because clearly there is an issue here, right? Clearly there is some problem in the conference and in the Republican Party itself that moving everyone up one doesn't exactly address that issue. That might be the best case scenario for Republicans, actually. I'm not going to make a judgment on any of that, but I will say that I think it does hurt. It puts Republicans in this position of, this happened. There's clearly an issue here. Boehner left. He wouldn't have left like this if there weren't an issue. And not addressing that in any sort of substantive way, everyone moves up one. That keeps that issue on the deck, really, right? I mean, conservatives are going to be just as fierce, maybe even more fierce with Kevin McCarthy, Steve Scalise, Patrick McHenry as the top three, as they would as something else. Now, obviously, Republicans in Congress are the ones who are running for these positions are going to use that. Right. Daniel Webster is running for Speaker. He's the former Florida House Speaker. And he got 12 votes in January against Boehner. He's not a very conservative guy, really. But he appeals to conservatives because he says the process is broken. And I think a lot of Republicans that message does resonate with a lot of Republicans in Congress, with that the process is broken.
I asked Rand Paul's campaign for a knee-jerk reaction, and he said, it's time to really address the power of the purse, which was this very cryptic sort of comment that we didn't use. But
I think the power of the purse means let's defund Planned Parenthood, let's defund Obamacare, or at least send those things. But
it just seems like a lot of this is kind of troublesome for Republicans on the campaign trail, because they can either it's a harder target to make, right? Like, it's harder to say, I don't know, it's except for maybe Scalise, who you know more about this than I do. From my view, and it seems like Scalise is the friendliest guy to the outside. We need to endorse an outsider in this race, but everyone else seems to be sort of like the DC insider thing.
I mean, I can't say Scalise is an outsider, particularly within Congress. I mean, he's the number 3 Republican.
Right.
His message last time resonated because he wasn't in the power structure. Roskin was the one who was supposed to be moving up a rung. And his message was, we need a Southern Republican, which that oddly resonates with a lot of Republicans in Congress. He's from Louisiana. And secondly, we want to go with a sort of different direction. And that message, carried the day. Now he doesn't really have that message as much, that this is, we need something new, because he's part of that same structure. I I don't know. We'll see. I mean, what is your sense though? I mean, I feel like I've talked so much about 2016 and all this stuff, but I'm interested to, you're the one.
Look, I mean, there's so many of these candidates right now are, I think more so than the last cycle. The big theme in 2016 is that outsiders. We want someone new. That's why you're seeing Carly Fiorina and Trump surging. And that's why you're seeing like Bobby Jindal and candidates really struggling in the polls to try and attack Washington. And even guys like Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio. Like Marco Rubio in that speech where he mentioned Boehner said, Washington is broken. It's the leaders of both parties who have a problem here.
Which is boilerplate. I mean,
which is boilerplate. But I think the rise of these candidates that just haven't ever been in office is telling. So you're gonna and I was talking to someone who said Ovid Lamontagne, I think it was, or no,
New Hampshire,
who
ran for governor a couple of years ago.
Who was singing the outsider thing, and just went at VVS when I was there and trying to pivot on the Boehner stuff. Like one person told me Scott Walker would be a good House Speaker, and you can obviously
you can elect
anyone. That would be weird.
Good luck.
But it seems to be. It seems like what?
If I just want to put it out there, if someone is elected Speaker who is not member of the House, I'm just going to put it out there. It's crazy. Give me like 10,001 odds. Eric Cantor is the guy.
I would not be. No, that would not surprise me. Actually, that would make sense to me. And I wonder if Eric Cantor's like doing that right now. Throwing out feelers.
He stands to lose a substantial amount of money. Part of his contract was like he couldn't leave sooner, but that's immaterial.
Sometimes he misses. But listen, I think it's going to be a little hard, and I think there's going to be a lot of I think crazy names when this comes up on the campaign trail are what a lot of these candidates are going to throw out there, because it doesn't really matter what they say, right? They're going to get their endorsements anyway. Like, what if Rand said Mick Mulvaney, who recently endorsed him? I mean, it would work for Rand because he's got someone who's totally out there who's really conservative.
Another guy who I think people could say, and this is it's such a division between the campaign and reality, is Trey Gowdy. Right?
That name has Trey Gowdy's beloved. He's running the Benghazi committee, right?
Right,
beloved by conservatives.
But outside conservatives, congressional conservatives, I'll go. No, he's been totally corrupted and brought into the fold, and he's leadership now, basically. But you're right. So you sort of hit this thing that I keep on hearing all the time from Republicans. And one guy, Thomas Massey, who's been very open about his opposition to Boehner and has been pushing Daniel Webster for a while now. He says basically look, you got Trump, Fiorina, Carson leading the polls. If we just elect another establishment guy, good luck with this place.
Right.
Right. I think it's a total,
right.
division.
I think that's going to be the big thing. That this is going to be I think, you might have I don't know, what fascinating, Ted Cruz continues to fascinate me. I say this in every episode I do, but this makes it even more fascinating for Ted Cruz, the reason Boehner calls him a jackass is because Ted Cruz has been the vanguard, the actual elected official, with that amazing, the Tortilla Coast story you broke of Ted Cruz was huddling at Tortilla Coast with House members. What does he do there? Cruz has not shied away from, on his 50-state strategy of bringing in what I call conservative rabble-rousers, Michelle Fiore in Nevada, or Chris McDaniel, who I've reported on a lot in Mississippi. I would not be surprised if he does something like that here in these House races, or tries to make a play. I don't know, Louis Gohmert. Where you haven't mentioned Louis once throughout this whole thing.
Louis, he says he's not going to run, bless his heart. Sometimes the leadership that you deserve is not the one you need, whatever. But, actually I saw on this is crazy. This is going to make this, but I saw on Facebook a guy I went to college with who was a politics major saying Louis Gohmert is supposedly the next guy in line to be the speaker, which is just, absurd. That's
I had
not
someone over the weekend when I went visit a friend. Someone was telling me people only there are just crazy opinions out there. This person was telling me people only Donald Trump because in the same way they only liked Obama because Obama was winning, and they liked Trump because they're winning, which I usually don't. I usually hate talking about politics on the clock, but that was like, what are you talking about? And neither of those guys would say I was popular because I'm like the other guy. No, Obama and Trump would never say that. Anyway, so like they're always crazy ideas. What does Ted Cruz do, Matt? This is what I want to close out on. Like, how does he take an advantage of this here? How does he,
So I love his term, the Washington cartel, right?
Yeah.
I think that he uses this. So because there is this divide between what even like Republicans will say in public, which is, we need new leadership, we need a new direction, we need a new process, we need a whole new slate, whatever, and then going behind closed doors and electing their old friends the positions.
Yeah,
I think that's a really likely scenario. I think in public you have a lot of members who say, I'm looking at all my options or whatever. I think we need this fixed or this changed, and then go on and absolutely elect the same slate of people. So for Cruz, if that's the scenario, I mean, he uses it to his advantage, right? He just says, look, if you just trust Washington to change itself, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Excusing for the moment that he is now part of Washington. I mean, he's a senator. If you just leave it to them, they're just going to, reshuffle the same seats on the Titanic. That's his message. The Washington cartel cannot be trusted. You need someone to come in there who's going to change things, who's going to radically break things up. I am your guy. I know how the system works because I've been there, but I am not part of the system, which, that's in so many instances, that is true. I think that's how he uses it. So it's another situation, and this is a refrain from a lot of establishment Republicans, which is like vote no and hope yes.
Yeah.
Right? They always say that conservatives are doing that with like the CR or, the debt ceiling. Vote no and hope yes.
And that means like I'm going to vote no, but I hope like my vote doesn't matter here, right?
Right. Well, so, Boehner said something that was actually kind of profound today. I'm sure it's not the first time he's ever said it. First time I've ever heard him say it, though, was that the speaker needs to have courage to do the things he can do. Mm-hmm. And like he basically said, courage is not saying like it's not about having the courage to do the things you can't do, right? Which when you sort of understand that and unpack that sentiment, it's actually really something. Because when we have to have the courage to defund Obamacare. He's saying, that's not what being a speaker is about because you're not going to accomplish that. Right? You can't. It's just not going to happen.
Right. So Boehner's big thing is like being able to do what's achievable, right?
Yeah. I mean, he used the term Woody Hayes style, and I know you're a college football fan, so I know you're not an Ohio fan. So
where is Boehner on? I guess he went to Xavier, so is he an OSU fan, or does he? Because Xavier is not.
They're not relevant.
No, they have good basketball. It's not.
I think he's got to be. I think he's got to be an Ohio State fan. I mean, you drop a Woody Hayes thing, that's gonna go
fair enough. Anyway,
so yeah, he said, Woody Hayes is 3 yards in a cloud of dust, right? And it is the incremental change, and I think actually, what's upset to go into like a total long thing, but what's upset so many liberals about Obama is that he's had a similar style of legislating, right?
Except for Obamacare and
but even then, though,
but
even though, we're talking about smaller incremental changes.
All the way.
Right.
When Obama ran on, change in
transformational change, right, change, hope, yeah, and to sort of misuse the word in its like modern context, it's like pragmatism, right? Being the pragmatist, and or the another one that a lot of establishment Republicans like to use, the adult at the table, right? Knowing what we can get and trying to go for that, or getting the Reagan quote, getting half a loaf of bread and going back the next day and trying to get the other half. That's sort of these guys' style, right? And that's, I think, that no matter who is elected, I think that's going to be the style going forward, because I just don't see someone who, maybe I'm totally wrong, and I hate to be the guy who just goes with sort of the conventional wisdom here, but I just don't see someone radically different moving in here, even though that could be the message that a lot of members say they want, and that's what we're sort of going after. But
the fight along the way is going to be great and bloody, right?
it could be great and bloody. I mean,
as a reporter, like
levitating.
these are just this is my careerist in me, like through you vicariously. Like, what does this mean for Matt's career? If these guys all fight each other to a bloody pulp, this could be great for me.
Yeah,
and I'm like that on the
Twitter
campaign
account.
trail. Like, there's always a part of a campaign reporter who's like, I really hope the candidate I'm assigned to goes far, because that will do wonders for my career.
Get that White House beat.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even though it's gonna win. Like, if he's the last man standing, how could this help me?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're part of the Washington cartel too.
I am part of. I am. I got my. The reason we taped today is because I went to the DMV yesterday, which slowed everything down to like officially get my literally my DC card, and it was a very painful process. I had to come home.
You got a real ID?
Yeah, I'm converting my Illinois ID because there's no corruption in Illinois to a DC ID. Or wait, there's some wonderfully clever joke. Yeah, in converting my Illinois ID to a DC ID. And I had to come home because one of the things I had didn't have, it had my address on it, but didn't have my apartment number. Everything else had, like, it just, like, boggles the mind. And they were like, this one doesn't have your apartment number on there. And it's like, everything else says Daniel Strauss, my address on there. I
had a hell of a time myself. Not to go into this crazy thing, but I stupidly have two middle names, and apparently my two middle names are hyphenated, which I found out on my birth certificate. And your birth certificate and like your social security card need to completely match. And because there's a hyphen, it doesn't. Insane. And then the Social Security Administration doesn't recognize hyphens, so it's a crazy thing that I had to get like a letter. I had a horrible DMV experience myself.
And then I had to pay $44, and you don't even get the ID.
So sounds like you're voting.
Okay, so last question, because I got to go, and my friend is here.
I know. Football time.
Where are Democrats on this? No, Matt. College football was yesterday. I don't care about NFL. I'm going to get ice cream and bike to the Basilica. That's my day. Have you ever been to the Basilica? That's unrelated politics, DC. I'm very looking forward to that.
Such a DC monster.
This is why I'm wearing my, anyway. Is Nancy Pelosi smiling? Is Steny Hoyer like, let's have some fun here, Nancy?
Yeah, so every word from conservatives I always heard was, don't count on Democrats to just cooperate with Boehner, because dysfunction and the craziness, like that's in their favor every time, right? It just shows that they're not like a governing majority, and then this strengthens their argument to vote Democrat. So in some ways, I think they might be cheering for someone a little bit crazy to shake it up, or they might be cheering for the situation where they get people who they know they can work with on some small items and go at it from that point of view.
Right.
But yeah, when I was talking to conservatives, they were talking about, this thought that Democrats will automatically cooperate with Boehner. And they were saying, you know what, like, I agree that they vote present on an actual motion to vacate, but how the motion to vacate would actually come up would be, to get like really, again, in the weeds here, is like a motion to table. So it's just basically like killing the motion.
Right.
And he was like, you know what, I don't think that Democrats cooperate to vote to table that. I think they advance it and just sort of like, watch the world burn a little bit.
Yeah,
right?
They want to stir the pot here. They don't have, and what's remarkable is they have
in this fight's chaos.
Barely any influence at all. So, well, anyway, Matt, it's been a pleasure talking to you. We went way over time. Thank you so much.
I feel like I talked so long.
No, this is what we wanted with this episode. So, brother, I will see you later.
Brother. Brother.
No.
No, it's the WWF.
Yeah. Oh God. Anyway, I will see you later. Have a good Sunday, and please keep reporting on this. I will talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.